"It's all arranged," said Dr. Adam. He was limping slightly as he walked back into the kitchen. "What is?" Mandy asked anxiously. "Betty Hilder said she could have Goldie and her litter at the animal sanctuary. She thinks she'd probably be able to find homes for the pups when they're old enough, and the Golden Retriever Rescue would be willing to take Goldie. That's unless someone claims her, of course, which I doubt." "We won't be taking Goldie to the animal sanctuary tonight, will we, Dad?" Dr. Adam smiled at his daughter. "No, unless she's claimed Goldie's staying here to have her pups," he said. "That's great," said Mandy, dashing over to give him a quick hug. "Does Mom know?" She went to take a quick shower. "What's the matter?" she asked as her dad gave a small gasp. "You knocked me off balance a bit, sweetheart, and my ankle isn't feeling so good." "Oh, Dad, I forgot all about Duke kicking you. Tell you what." Mandy took the first aid box down, then handed Dr. Adam a tub of anesthetic cream. "Sit down and rub some of this on your ankle while I finish dinner." She turned to glance over at the Golden Retriever. "I don't think Goldie wants hers." "Don't worry about it, Mandy. Expectant moms often go off their food a couple days before the pups are due." Mandy nodded. "That's what Mom said, but I'm worried that she feels too strange and unhappy to eat." "Well, we'll see how things develop. In the meantime, let's try to make sure she drinks a reasonable amount of fluid." Dr. Adam gave a little groan as he started to rub the cream in, and immediately Goldie waddled over to him. She sniffed at his ankle, then whined a little as though in sympathy. She licked his hand. "Well, I don't know whether you feel sorry for me or if you just like the smell of the cream," said Dr. Adam softly, "but you're a good, brave girl, aren't you?" "She's thanking you for letting her stay to have her pups," said Mandy. She smiled at Goldie, and as Goldie allowed Dr. Adam to rub the top of her golden head before turning to waddle away. "Dad, do you think her owner did abandon her? How could anyone bear to? She's such a loving, gentle animal." "She's also having puppies," Dr. Adam replied grimly. "Maybe her owner hadn't bargained for that." "But they'd have noticed before now," said Mandy. "I think she was stolen and the thieves panicked when she realized she was pregnant." "In that case, she'll be reported missing." Dr. Adam shook his head. "Only time will tell, Mandy." Mandy nodded. Look, she's settling down in front of the stove again. "I'll get my big beanbag for her later. We can put an old blanket and a sheet over it. And what about—" "Mandy, dinner," prompted Dr. Adam, smiling. "I'm sure that soup is more than ready now, and I toasted the sandwiches while you and Mom were examining Goldie. They're on a baking tray in the oven. If we don't eat them soon, they'll be soggy." "It'll be a bit of a struggle getting them out," Mandy chuckled. "There isn't too much room between Goldie and the oven door." In the end, Mandy had to kneel down and stretch over the big dog to get the tray of toasted sandwiches out. "That's all right. You just keep still," whispered Mandy. Goldie blinked sleepily, then yawned. Other than that, she didn't move a muscle. "That soup smells good." Dr. Emily hurried in, looking pink and warm. Mandy hid a grin. Her mom's cheeks were clashing terribly with her red hair, which was tied up on top of her head. "You look pleased, Mandy," Dr. Emily said. "I guess that means your dad got the okay for Goldie to stay a while?" Mandy nodded and carried the soup bowls to the table. "What I want to know," said Mandy, once they were all eating, "is why you're letting Goldie stay at Animal Ark for the next few days. You're usually so strict about not taking in strays. Not that I'm complaining, of course," she added with a happy smile. "Special circumstances," Dr. Adam replied. "If it's the dog's first litter, and we think it is, she might need help when the pups start to arrive, especially after what she's been through this evening. Letting her go to another strange place with another bunch of strangers, well," Dr. Adam shook his head. Your dad and I agreed that it would have caused her too much distress, said Dr. Emily, and moving Goldie around could send her into labor before she's completely ready. I think it's unlikely she'll start for a day or two, said Dr. Adam, but first thing tomorrow we'll have to organize things. We should fix up a good place for her to have the pups and try to get her familiar with that place before anything happens. What do you mean, fix up a good place? Mandy asked. Dr. Emily smiled. It will be easier to keep an eye on her if she's in the house. Besides, she might settle in better if she feels like part of the family while she's here. Though I think it would be sensible to confine her to the kitchen. It's close to the yard, and it's the best room to arrange a birth area in. I'll call James first thing in the morning, Mandy said eagerly. He'll be really glad to come and help. That's if you don't think seeing another new face will upset Goldie. She'll probably be happy to meet James, said Dr. Emily. Golden Retrievers are popular family dogs because they like having people around them. And she'll be able to smell Blackie on him, which should help. Blackie was James Hunter's black Labrador. James had had him since he was a tiny pup, so he was used to handling dogs. He loved animals almost as much as Mandy did. The two of them had often worked together, helping ill or injured animals. When they'd cleared the dinner dishes away, Mandy got the big beanbag from the corner of her bedroom, as well as a soft old blanket and a sheet. This is your bed, girl, she told the dog. Goldie lifted her head to glance up at it, then closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Just leave it there. She might decide to use it later, said Dr. Emily. And listen, Mandy, I don't want you to keep coming down in the night to check on her. I'm sure she won't go into labor just yet, but I'll look in on her a couple times anyway, all right? Mandy knew from her mother's firm tone that she really meant what she said. All right, she agreed. But how about if I get up early? I'll take Goldie into the yard if she wants to go, and I'll give her some milk afterwards. I can get all my chores done early as well. Then I'll call James. That would be okay, wouldn't it, Mom? Fine, Dr. Emily replied, and Mandy went happily to bed. The next morning, James arrived at Animal Ark 10 minutes after Mandy had called him. She'd told him not to knock on the back door, but to come right in. That way Goldie will think you're one of us, she'd said. So James, slightly out of breath and his eyes bright behind his glasses, walked in and went straight over to sit at the kitchen table. Dad's changing the front wheel on my bike, he said. I ran all the way here. James lived at the other end of town. At the sound of his voice, the golden retriever lifted her head from her paws. She looked at him steadily for a moment, then lowered her head again. James smiled. Not exactly a big hello, but at least she isn't bothered that I'm here. She's very pretty, Mandy. She's got such a gentle-looking face. She's got a nice, gentle nature, too, said Mandy. She really likes it in front of the stove, James. I took her out in the yard early this morning, then persuaded her to drink some milk when we came back in. She didn't want any food, but Dad said not to worry about that. After she'd had her milk, she went straight back to lie down. She completely ignored the beanbag I made for her. She's probably used to lying in front of a stove wherever she's from. James looked from Goldie to Mandy, a look of disbelief on his face. Do you think she has been abandoned, Mandy? Mandy shrugged helplessly. Dad's called all the places he contacted last night, and there's still no report of a golden retriever missing from home. But if she was stolen, it might have been miles out of our area. James scowled and shook his head. It doesn't take long for information to reach other counties, he pointed out. They use computers to do that. Well, all we can do to make her feel as good as possible, said Mandy, and fix up a special place for when she has the puppies. I've been thinking about that. Dr. Adam came in just in time to hear Mandy's last words. He smiled at James, then pointed to a large cabinet a couple yards away from the stove. We could pull all that out. I'm sure we can find somewhere else to put it temporarily. And I bet one of those special boxes for when a dog or cat has a litter would fit perfectly in the space. The single cupboard will separate it from the stove, so the area will be nice and warm without being too hot. Have we got a spare one in the clinic? Mandy asked. No, we need to keep ours in case of any emergencies. But luckily, Dr. Adam grinned, the man who works for the company that makes them lives in Walton. Walton was just 2 miles away from Welford. Mandy and James went to Walton Moor School there, but they weren't in the same class. James was a year younger than Mandy. I've already called him, Dr. Adam continued. He's agreed to bring his sample model over. All we need to do is assemble it. Dad, you're brilliant, said Mandy. Come on, James, help me drag this cabinet out. Mandy. James shoved his glasses farther into his nose. Doesn't your mom keep dishes in that cabinet? Yes, but... Oh, I see what you're getting at, Mandy laughed. You're right, James. We'll have to empty it first. That's up to you two, said Dr. Adam, ruffling Mandy's hair. I've done my part for now. I've got to make a couple of home visits. One of them is to Yindy, another upset stomach. Mandy chuckled. Yindy was a Siamese cat with a habit of eating wool. No matter how hard her owner tried to hide wool sweaters from the Siamese, Yindy somehow managed to find every new hiding place. She'd claw at the garment until the wool started to unravel, then bite off and eat all of those loose bits. Make sure you keep your jacket on while you're there, Dad. Mandy glanced meaningfully at the warm wool sweater Dr. Adam was wearing. Will do, he replied cheerfully. Hello, girl, he added softly. Goldie had raised her head again and was looking up at him. Do you want me to pet you? Have you decided I'm not too bad after all? She wasn't too sure of Dad at first, Mandy told James as they watched Dr. Adam petting the dog. I bet she came around soon, though, said James. Both your parents are great with animals. As Mandy nodded, she noticed that Dr. Adam's hands were moving slowly over Goldie's barrel-like sides. Everything is okay, isn't it, Dad? She whispered anxiously. As far as I can tell, everything seems fine, sweetheart. Just make sure you take her outside as soon as she shows any signs of wanting to go. Okay, said Mandy. We'll empty the cabinet and see if she wants to go out before we start moving it. She smiled as Goldie pawed at James's sneakers. A look of delight appeared on her friend's face, and he bent down to pet the dog. Mandy guessed he'd been longing to do that. But James was good with animals, too. He'd known to wait until Goldie wanted him to pet her. By the time Desmond Barrett, the sales representative, arrived at the back door with a special box, Mandy and James had finished preparing the small area it was going in. I won't come in, Mandy, Desmond said quietly. It might upset the poor girl seeing another stranger. The box is easy enough to assemble. Everything slides into place. There's an instruction sheet with it, so you shouldn't have any trouble. Before long, the parts of the box were all spread out over the kitchen floor. Mandy and James were on their knees, reading over the instruction sheet, when Goldie got up and walked toward them. You know, Mandy, James said thoughtfully, that leather collar looks awfully heavy for her to wear all the time. You're right, it does. Mandy got up. I'll go over to the clinic and get a lightweight one for her. Jean Knox, Animal Arc's receptionist, glanced up when Mandy hurried through the connecting door. She knew all about Goldie, of course. If anyone happened to call about the golden retriever during office hours, she'd be the one to answer the phone. Everything okay? She asked. No problems? Your mom's with a patient, but I can get Simon for you. Simon was the nurse. No problems, Jean, Mandy assured her. But Goldie's wearing a heavy collar. She could use a lightweight one. Will it be okay if I take one from the sales display? I'll buy it for her, Mandy. I'd like to do something to help. Thanks, Jean, Mandy smiled. I'll tell Goldie that it's a present from you. I'll have a blue one, please. Mandy hurried back to the kitchen with the new collar and showed it to Goldie. This will be comfier for you, she said. You owe James and Jean a lick. Mandy removed the leather collar and put it on the floor beside her. Then she put the new one around the dog's neck. Goldie whined and walked slowly towards the back door. You take her, Mandy, James said. I think I've figured out where everything goes, and it'll be easier putting it together with Goldie out of the way. She was getting interested in all the different pieces while you were gone. She kept sniffing them. That's good, said Mandy as she opened the back door. Let's hope that means she'll be happy to use it when it's ready. Goldie made her way to the end of the yard and went to the same spot she'd used before. Good girl, Mandy told her. You're starting to make a nice little routine for yourself, aren't you? How about staying out a while longer? Give James time to put your special box together. But James suddenly appeared at the back door. Mandy! Mandy! He called urgently. Come here! Quick!